So I guess, and in kind of just a really just nonchalant way to start, how are you doing? I mean, you've had, we're now almost 2 weeks removed from when you first made the announcement about your contract status with WWE. Yep. You've had a lot of time to speak with people. You've made some appearances. You've wrestled your first match that's not under the WWE banner in a long time. How are you doing? How do you feel the reaction has been to your announcement, and how do you feel about your direction so far?
Good. I'm excited. Like you mentioned, we're about, I guess, 10 or 11 days in, post announcement, I guess we'll call it, and about 9 days into my free agency. Things are going well. My calendar's booking up very solidly. I've made a few appearances, as you alluded to, and they've gone well. They've gone really well. The reception has been great. I mean, these are kind of places where I made my mark before I was in WWE, so they were obviously excited to have me back. I was excited to be back. It's been really positive for the most part. There's been some trending lately in like a direction that I knew it would trend. So all my close friends have been released by WWE. I wasn't released, but I was, my contract was not extended. It's similar, but different in some capacities. Regardless, when that happens, there tends to be this trend amongst groups of fans, and not a small group, right? There's a large conglomerate of whichever thing that you prefer, whatever your preference of professional wrestling is, you tend to gravitate towards that, and you want to love that and defend that, right? So I knew that it would kind of trend in this direction. It's difficult to watch it happen, right? Because you can mentally prepare yourself for it, but the reality of the situation is there's some people out there. There's a good number of people out there who are now, like, we'll call it the honeymoon period has worn off, and now they're actively looking for reasons why to dislike me, or quote unquote side with the WWE, which is again not. I didn't I didn't try to pit myself against WWE. I've never painted in that light. I've been very thankful. I've supported all my coworkers. I've been thankful to the people who gave me those spots. But when these divisive moments happen, right? And I didn't orchestrate this moment. If it were up to me, I'd still be with WWE, right? Like I wanted to actively negotiate, and they did not. So these divisive moments happen, and it creates this split amongst some this chunk of fans who are very vocal, and they are just actively looking for reasons to. Long story, there's a lot of pieces to it, but basically they're looking to affirm WWE because that makes them feel good, right? That makes that puts them in a space where now I can watch Raw and be at peace. Now I can watch SmackDown and Money in the Bank and not feel like I'm, doing something wrong, right?
And it justifies a bad decision on their part because they didn't. Why didn't they work to re-sign Dijak? It's because of X, Y, and Z.
I'm not gonna say bad decision, right? It's a business decision, so I don't know if it's good or bad, or they obviously save X amount of dollars. Do I feel like I'm worth X amount of dollars? Yes, I do, but I'm me, so I'm biased, right? So it's this game, but toward this section of fans, right? And it's a good section of fans, and trust me, I know what that feels like, right? I've been all in on one, pardon the pun, on one company, and but I watch the other one, so and people label it as this tribalism thing, right? And certainly that plays a role, but at the end of the day, everybody's just a human being, right? And they don't want to feel they want their decisions to feel right and just. Right. So if there's a reason, if I did something that forced their hand and they had no choice, now all of a sudden that justifies the decision. Now you feel a little bit better about what happened. Right. So basically, long story short, I'm getting a lot of people who are, saying that I'm complaining too much, that I'm not. I'm doing a lot of these interviews, and a lot of these interviews get people don't watch them, right? They just get aggregated, and a quote gets ripped out of them, and it just says Dijak said this, and then you see another quote with my picture next to it. It's like, oh, well, this guy shut up. He's just complaining about everything. Well, I'm not complaining. I'm answering the same questions over and over and over again, and people just see the quote and they're like, oh, you won't shut up about it. We get it. You hate WWE. I don't hate WWE in any capacity. I don't hate them. I'm being open and honest about some of the decisions that were made toward the end of our relationship. But I mean, that's what I'm always going to be. And if that comes off as bitter or like I'm burning a bridge or something, I don't feel that way. I just like it, if it's looked at that way, all I'm doing is telling the truth of what happened in a bit. And quite frankly, I'm keeping a lot of opinion and names and suspicions right out of the picture, because I don't want to come off that way, because at the end of the day, my opinions are just that. A lot of them are not based in fact. I don't have enough information because I wasn't given answers. I didn't have conversations that I wanted to have. So I have my own speculations and guesses, and sometimes people ask me those questions too, and I try to be as upfront and honest as I can. But so long story short, yeah, I'm kind of in I'm in this interesting space right now where things are going very positively professionally, but I'm also wading through a lot of negativity, right? And a lot of that is on me, right? Because I could just ignore it, but
you're in an
part
industry.
Part of my job is gauging the interest of fans, seeing what they like, seeing what they're interested in. And right now, I'm getting a lot of feedback that's like, "Hey, move on." But again, there's also a lot of people who just want me to not exist, right? Because I'm a reminder of something that turns them off, something that they watch WWE because it's there, because they have a difficult life, and it's their 2 hours of freedom. And when my name pops up, it's a reminder that there's negativity in the business, and they just want me to go away. And I understand that. Right. That being said, it's not my job to go away, right? It's your job to block me or mute me or stop going on Twitter and reading websites and whatever you need to do. If my existence bothers you, that's okay, right? You are entitled to feel that way. It's not my job to stop talking to comfort your disinterest. So no. I'm sorry to anyone who I'm a reminder of some of the negative aspects of WWE and the professional wrestling business. That being said, I'm just myself, and this is my job, and staying relevant is my job. And I'm trying to do it in the most tasteful way possible while still trying to be entertaining and humorous. And that's my reality that I'm living in.
Gotcha. And first of all, thank you very much for being as open and honest with that as possible. Sure. I really do. Wrestling, it's such a weird dichotomy, right? The fans, it's the love and hate with the fans, right? You need them because it's so intricate to everything that wrestling is, as far as having their backing and having their engagement. But at the same time, like you said, you find this subset of fans that they were going to be angry about something anyway. And I think we all kind of know that. I think unfortunately social media kind of breeds that toxicity, and it does it. Were you surprised at that reaction? Did you think maybe because you had kind of started, the ratios, for I know I made the joke about it earlier about you're going to ratio us, but you kind of started kind of making those inroads with fans online, trying to kind of gauge them in that way. Did you think maybe you had a better grasp on how they were going to react? Was this a surprise, or did you kind of know, listen, at some point I'm going to hit that wall of people who are just going to be negative because they want to be negative?
Yeah, I mean, I had a good idea. I tried to brace for it as much as possible. I've been very open and upfront about who I've been dealing with and what I've been saying. And let's call a spade a spade. I bring a lot of this upon myself, right? Because I'm so open and honest that it can be polarizing sometimes. Sometimes I in the past, I've said, and in the present and in the future too, I'm more often than not, I'm going to say something that's on my mind if I feel that it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's an opinion on something, right? And I do my best to try to make it humorous, right, or in a good light. But
it is wrestling.
Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not. One time, I'll give you a recent example. One time, CM Punk, who I'm now, I wouldn't say we're friends, but like, if we're in the same room, we talk to each other. We have a conversation because we both enjoy each other's presence. We've met each other 3 times, so it's not like we're best friends and I'm going to his birthday party. But if I walk into a locker room and he's in there, we'll have a conversation. It's a nice, pleasant, lighthearted conversation. That being said, before I met him, I had 2 of my actual best friends. These are guys who I will go to their birthday party, and I know their children. I've been to and that's MXM, the former Maximum Male Models, Mason D. Madden, and Mansoor. These are some of my very, very, very close friends, and they were on Monday Night Raw at the time, but they were not being used on Monday Night Raw. They were just being flown out. It's a spot that I'm familiar with. It's a difficult spot. It's mentally taxing. It's a dark place to be in because you're going away from your family and you're going to this and you're wondering when you're going to get released. And it's this whole mixed bag of emotions that people don't realize. They just think, what are you complaining about? You're getting a check and blah, blah, blah. Shut your mouth.
It's great. You get to sit in the back and do nothing and you get to just
exactly.
Free. It's awesome. What's your problem?
Yes. I'm not going to. We always try when we were in that space, because all my friends were in that space. We tried to keep our minds focused on that, right? I'm getting paid a good amount of money to basically do nothing. I need to keep that in my mind, that there are a lot of people out there who are struggling to make ends meet, and I need to, be thankful and gracious. Here's the reality of the situation. We don't know when that's going to end, and it could end any second. And when it does, you're in trouble, right? Because you've been sitting in catering, you're not gaining any momentum. This can end in a second. And this is what I was talking about with the contracts. And again, people were looking for something to clip and complain about, and I gave it to them, and fine. And maybe they'll clip this, and fine, whatever. I can take it. I just like to be honest for those of whom actually decide to watch this interview. And I'd like to give as much context as possible. When I said that about the contracts, it's not saying like, oh, I shouldn't have signed because a lot of the commentary then becomes, well, you knew what you were signing. You did. Of course I knew what I was signing. That doesn't change the fact that it's difficult to be under it. And I wish it were different, right? That you can feel the same way about 2 things, right? You can be in a relationship with someone and both love that they do this thing and hate that they do this thing. That is a very real thing that every human being can relate to. So I feel the same way about WWE contracts. I love the platform and the compensation. I hate the fact that they do not need to have a reason. It kind of defeats the purpose of the word contract, because they don't have to hold up their end of the 3-year bargain, right? They just, and again, this is written in there and we read it and we know it. That being said, by definition, it just feels like that part of the contract should be more solid to me. So we're all in this position. We know what it feels like for that they can just release you at any time. And if you're sitting in the back, that's a really good reason for you to get released. If you're just not doing anything, they don't have any creative. So it's difficult. It's a dark place to be in, because you're trying to do these things. You're trying to get on TV. You're trying to show them how much value you're worth. And that's a hard thing to comprehend for someone who's saying, you're just getting this huge deposit in your account every week. Yes, correct. Still difficult mentally, because the future is uncertain, and that's difficult. It just is. I don't know how else to phrase it. We're professional wrestlers. We can't do this our entire lives. Our bodies will break down when we're 45 years old. So we need to have enough money to retire by that age, or we're going to be limping around a ring trying to do, because a lot of us don't have a backup skill set, right? You can't just go, oh, well, I'll be a lawyer instead. I don't. The only thing I can do is lock up and grab a headlock. So I need a backup plan for when I turn 45. If I don't have enough money to live for the next 40 years of my life, God willing, and to support my children, send them through college. I need all that money saved up by X amount of days. So if I get released at this point, and these are all the dots that are connecting in our heads as we're sitting in catering, staring at the wall, praying that someone reads our pitch or whatever, So again, long story short, it's a dark place, whether people understand why it is or not. That being said, my friends are in the back. They're flown out to TV. They don't have anything that week, but it's difficult. So I hear through the grapevine, actually I heard from them first, but then I start hearing it reported that CM Punk is backstage. And everybody's blowing up. Everybody's saying this, that, and the other. He should be on Raw. He's going to that because he's signed to AEW at the time, or he's at least under contract. Maybe I don't remember the exact timeline, but yeah. So there's this huge outpouring, this huge buzz, and in my mind, I'm thinking, my best friends are also backstage at Raw, and nobody cares. Nobody. There's not one mention of it. There's not one tweet. There's not one. And I understand why, right? I understand that CM Punk is this huge star and he used to be the WWE champion. This is a big deal, right? So I completely understand that. That being said, I'm not just going to sit back while my friends are being ignored and are going to get released and all these negative things are going to happen that people that I love and I want to see succeed. So I'm going to use what's happening to benefit them. So I said I posted something, and again, probably not the best or smartest thing I've ever done, or it was honest. It was honest, and it's how I felt at the time. And I said something to the effect of, "Hey, why don't we stop worrying about the people who are backstage not employed by the company and start worrying about the people who are employed by the company? Because that's my friends, right? They're backstage, and nobody cares. Nobody's saying, hey, please book blah blah blah. Please book the maximum male models. Please do something." No one's saying that. They're all talking about CM Punk, who doesn't even work for the company at that point. That bothered me, and I wanted to shift the narrative as much as I could to get focus on the people that I love and respect at that time. Well, CM Punk's fans did not see it that way, and they destroyed me. They eviscerated me. They hate my guts. To this day, there will be a lot of times where I'll see like hate comments pop up, and I'm like, why does this guy hate me so? And it'll be like CM Punk's #1 fan. I'm like, oh, well, they never got over it, right? Usually there's a pretty obvious reason when someone's just spewing hate at me, and it's usually ironically a bunch of things that I've built bridges with and I'm now involved with, right? Like it's usually like a CM Punk fan. I met CM Punk and we have a great relationship. An AEW fan, I've been to AEW and I know all the people in AEW. We all have a great relationship. This is the worst one of all, people who don't support trans rights, because I was very upfront. It was a very polarizing and outpouring or people who are just outright racist, because I did two back-to-back tweets that were like, the T in T-bar stands for trans rights and the B in T-bar stands for Black Lives Matter. And of course, that'll weed out everybody who hates trans people and who hates black people. Right. They can go fuck off anyway. And I hope that, they don't support me, and I hope they block me. But, I'm going to see that in the comment section. And I mute them as quick as humanly possible, because I don't want their support anyway. Those other two groups, I do want their support. I want CM Punk's fans to come back around on me, and I want AEW fans to come back around on me, because yes, I've said some polarizing stuff about those things because of where I was at those times and because of some of the things that those people said. But we're all on the same page now, and we're all it's a mixed. The pro wrestling landscape is an ever changing spectrum of things. So I promise nobody inside the business is taking those portions of it as seriously as fans are. I mean, unless there's like a sincere altercation with but let's leave that to the people involved and not put ourselves in their shoes on their behalf, because nobody wants that part of it, right? Like, nobody wants the fans to like pick a side. You better pick a side. It just doesn't exist from our point of view.
So so it's so funny because that was one of my questions I wanted to ask you is this perceived quote unquote war, right? You know, I think and from a fan perspective, because of, you know, I mean, I've come to know professional wrestling as a fan first and now trying to be a journalist second. You know, everyone has this very nostalgic view of the Attitude Era. They love the idea of people hating one another. People forget that during the Attitude Era, the WCW wrestlers and the WF wrestlers were all going to the same hotel, going to the same bars afterwards, hanging out. And, you know, everybody wants to make money. So how much of this quote unquote, this rivalry is conjured by the fans because we want it to exist because it's more entertaining that way? And how much of it is a real sentiment that's felt by you guys as the performers and as from the company's perspective? Is there any truth to it at all? Or is it just kind of a fabrication?
It's a great question. Again, it varies from person to person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very team-oriented person. I grew up in basketball and football. My team meant everything to me. The people who were fighting on my behalf. So in that aspect, I've always been very protective of those around me. I'll give you an example. When probably the most prominent example is when AEW, I don't remember the exact timeline, but AEW announced they're going on TV and it was in a time slot, basically in contrast to NXT was at that time. So we announced that we were going to be moving to the USA Network, and it was, but we were like, we're going to be like a week earlier. So I don't remember the exact details of all of it, but it was around that time, right?
It was AEW and then NXT announced it would be the same time slot or something like that, whatever it was.
So basically we have all of the guys, not all of the guys, but like, let's keep it vague and say, quote unquote, the office is like hyping us up, like, hey, that's our time slot. They're coming for our time slot, blah, 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 blah. Which was true. Yeah. They entered a time slot that WWE NXT was on historically on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. or whatever it happened to be. And then they took that, I don't know if they took that personally, but they took that as a attack on business, which it was, right? It's trying to divide a market share of fans and make them choose between one product or the other. It's a business decision, right? It's a business decision at the end of the day. But a lot of the office was trying to let us know how. I'm trying to choose my words wisely because I don't think they made it like as personal as, but like there was a clear sentiment that like, hey, let's
you're rallying the troops.
We're going head to head, and we need to show them what we're all about. We need to show the world what we're all about, etc. And I'm surrounded by these people that I've been in the proverbial trenches with, right? I've been on training with them. I've been on coconut loops with them. I've been doing these tapings with them for a couple of years now. So it's like I'm really good friends with these people. So when I saw something, when I see anything that's about those guys that are my, I get very defensive of that, right? If it's the talent, right? If you're gonna say whatever about, but even if it's the show, right? If you're saying something about the about just in general, I've been defensive over that because these are my friends. Ironically, most of them are in AEW right now, right? They're either on the main roster or they transferred to AEW because it's not that serious. But at the end of the day, what I support is the talent and the company that's putting their stock in me, right? Obviously that can change with time, right? The company no longer is putting their stock in me, so my views on the team aspect are going to change. In terms of my teammates, those guys will always be, I will always have their back. I'll always support them 100%. They'll always, no matter where they go, I'm going to be their number one cheerleader and supporter as much as I can be, right? If I'm under if I'm under the banner of a contract, that changes things a little bit because I can't be, I can be live tweeting AEW. Like, I'll give you an example of another thing. very recently I posted that that I feel that Tony Storm has the best gimmick in all professional wrestling.
Yes.
And there was a lot of people who loved that and agreed with me. And then there was another section of fans, and a pretty sizable section, that were like, he's just begging for a job. Put the fries in the bag. You're a loser. You just, here's a job application, blah, 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 blah. Right? That's not what this is.
Of course.
I've always watched AEW. I've always enjoyed AEW. Since Tony switched to that gimmick, it's been my favorite gimmick. I just couldn't talk about it because, like, what does it reflect on me as an investment of WWE if I'm tweeting every day that, oh, I love it. AEW was great this week. Dynamite was awesome. Tony Storm had an amazing promo. And it's not like they would see that and just like, I'd get a bunch of, maybe I'd get a text that's like, stop it or something. I don't know, because I never did it. But like, you can't be flying the flag of the company that's not paying you, right? Because that's going to bother those who are paying you, and then ultimately it didn't matter because they ended up making the decision regardless. Right. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of the middle ground that you're in, and right now I'm in a spot where I don't have to worry about that. I'm the only one who's paying me. I mean, the companies that are booking me, obviously, but like I'm in charge of my own quote unquote contract status or free agency status. So I don't owe anything to anyone in terms of what I'm saying. So I'm saying nice things about NXT last night because I loved my time in NXT and I want those people to succeed. I love the people in AEW. I want those people to succeed, So even long story short, yes, there is a sense of ownership of where you are and to obviously want that to do well. At no point did I ever feel like our jobs were being threatened, right? Because that would probably change something, right? So I understand the Attitude Era in a sense. I'm sure there were some guys in WWF that hated the guys in WCW and vice versa. And I'm sure the management as well, because at that point, jobs were likely on the line, and it ended up coming to fruition because all those WCW guys pretty much lost their jobs. And there was some contract status in AOL Time Warner and how long they went and et cetera. And a lot of them got shifted over to Vince. But at the end of the day, there was a quote unquote war, and one of the companies didn't exist anymore. So there were people without jobs and stuff. And that's a reason for animosity, right? That's a reason for like, I need to bury this guy because I need to get over, because I need to make sure that it never felt like that. Anything I ever said was either how I honestly felt about whatever that person had said and whether it had offended me or not, or it was like a lighthearted jab just to get likes on Twitter or whatever. Are those all the best decisions I've ever made? No. Are they the best decisions that people on the other side have ever made? No. That being said, you drum up controversy and you hope that everybody's kind of working in the same direction, right? In terms of, I don't think any of us actually hate each other, right? There's no reason to hate each other. Most of us have all the same friends, and we're all working towards the same goal, which is let's make this the most entertaining, profitable pro wrestling landscape possible for all of us, so the fans can enjoy it as much as possible and the wrestlers can make as much money as we possibly can. I mean, that's the goal. I don't think anyone would be against that. Just this huge landscape where you have a ton of options on where to spend your money on things that you enjoy. I mean, that's all anybody wants really at the end of the day. And sometimes in a pro wrestling sense, that involves blurring the lines between fiction and reality. So it happens, and I'm not going to say that there aren't people in the pro wrestling space that I honestly don't like and have a problem with. I think everybody does, but that's every job. That's every walk of human life. Nobody walks around
just loving
everybody. It just doesn't.
Everyone's great. I've never had a problem with anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. So, but yeah, in terms of the actual pick a side tribalism amongst fans, I'm not going to say that doesn't exist in pro wrestling, because I'm sure there's some people that feel strongly that way. It's sometimes we portray it to be bigger than it is to generate a feeling about us and our character. For the most part, I'd say it's at this point, they've both companies, or all these companies, have been around for so long,
right?
That if you've been in the business for any semblance of time, you have friends all over the place. So you can't root against your friends, or you're a scumbag. Which isn't to say there aren't scumbags, but it's it's just
For
part.
sure.
It's part of the whole thing.
I want you to know that the byline that I'm going to come out after this interview is, he said all in once and he said scumbag once. So clearly obviously there's a plan. I see it. I can see the whole thing.
Who says scumbags?
Well, it's MJF is a scumbag, right? So that's where
I didn't realize he was using that as like an official. I thought that was just one thing that he said.
The moniker that people call him, I guess. So I decided.
Does he have like T-shirts? I mean, he's one of my friends. So and we talked on Sunday, but I didn't know that was like in an official capacity as scum. Yeah, I guess he does have the T-shirts, and it's like your favorite scumbag or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
something along those lines.
Something like that, yeah.
And again, thank you again for that was for your just honesty with that. And I think that there's a lot of it's a lot of just sentiment out there where it's just kind of like we're in a great period of professional wrestling where there's so much that people can enjoy, and maybe they shouldn't hate the fact that the other thing exists. They should just be happy that we're all able to be happy at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're on the topic of AEW, and I don't want to harp on it, I'm not trying to pin you down with anything. Obviously, you did get a chance to go over and visit AEW at Forbidden Door. What was that experience like for you? And that's a very large pay-per-view for them. It's a co-branded by company pay-per-view, which it has a lot of kind of difficulties maybe with it. What was that locker room like, and how does it maybe differ from places you've been before?
Well, I didn't enter the locker room per se. I would never, because like there's backstage, but then there's the locker room, and that's two very different things. I would never walk into the locker room of a show that I'm not on. That's just me and my own personal preference. I never got like offended if I was in the WWE locker room and someone else walked in who wasn't part of the locker room, even if they were a wrestler. But it kind of depended on who it's just my own standard, right? I don't like to be in a locker room that I'm not part of. So I was just backstage kind of with everybody else, but that the wrestlers come out and walk through backstage, and so it was good to see everyone. It was good to have a lot of those interactions, see a lot of faces that I hadn't seen in a long time, even amongst like a lot of the New Japan guys that I hadn't seen in a long time, because we used to do co-branded Ring of Honor pay-per-views with New Japan. So there was a lot of the production and backstage personnel. A lot of the old Ring of Honor production and backstage personnel are slated in those roles in AEW now. So that's cool to see all those guys and catch up with those guys. It was just fun. It was a fun experience. Again, my favorite part of being backstage at WWE was the locker room with the boys, because that's just where I like to be. I like to be in that locker room. I like to be surrounded by people that I like and get along with. So I didn't get that experience at AEW. That obviously would have been a lot different of an experience, right? Because that's the full experience where you get the full kind of rundown of everything and how it's going. But just generally being backstage was nice and pleasant. Nobody was like mean or rude or anything like that. So what's that?
So what's that guy doing here? He's here just to show the pay-per-view.
I didn't get any of that. I think people were surprised to see me there, but since it was so fresh and it was so kind of out of left field, but quite frankly, I was surprised to be there. If you'd told me 2 weeks before, I was in the WWE locker room on WWE Speed wrestling Xavier Woods like 3 weeks ago or 4, whatever the timeline is. So at that point, I wouldn't have predicted that I would be there so shortly thereafter. It's right. It kind of takes you back. It takes me back. It took them back. But at the end of the day, it's not like a lot of these guys have wrestled. A lot of them, I've gone out with to get food and whatever. So it's not. it was nice. It was nice to see my friends, and it was nice to catch up with people. Other than that, I didn't get like the full experience. You know, I don't know what Gorilla looks like. I didn't get to talk to Tony. I didn't get to experience what it feels like to walk out in front of the crowd. I didn't get to go back and go to the locker room. So I had none of the like actual elements of being in AEW. So long story short, I can't answer your question too great beyond like.
I think you're doing great.
I mean, the experience I had is the experience that tons of people have, right? Like if you're an extra, I had that experience. If you're just some management guy who's floating around backstage, that was basically what I was doing. I was just floating around backstage. So yeah, I mean, it was nice, and it seemed like it was a well-run operation, you know, with all the bells and whistles that you need to run a full-scale operation like that. But in terms of the full-on experience, I obviously didn't have that yet.
Gotcha. And maybe we'll see if that is something in your future or not. Maybe we'll see. I guess you're out of a very interesting experience in WWE where you got to experience both versions of NXT. You got to experience the old black and gold. On a personal note, one of my favorite matches you were ever involved in is one that actually didn't take place necessarily in NXT. It was while you were in NXT with John Huber at Worlds Collide 2019. I think that was the match of the weekend, and I think that might have been one of the matches of the year. You got to experience that version of NXT, and then you got to experience the post NXT 2.0 kind of revamped version of it. And in both, you saw success for different reasons and in different ways. For yourself, when you compare the two, is there one that you prefer? Is there one that you think was stronger than the other, or just maybe even just what the differences were for you, you know, in a general sense?
I think they were both incredibly strong in terms of a product presentation. So in terms of what, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So for me on a personal level, the second run means a lot more to me because I got a lot more of what I wanted to do in terms of presentation. I had a lot more matches. I was on TV a lot more. I was on premium live events a lot more. So on a personal level, it was much more fulfilling for me. It seems that the fan sentiment for the most part is split. If you look at like ratings and stuff and things like that, I think YouTube views and maybe social media stuff was probably higher for Black and Gold. I remember my stuff just kind of getting posted. It would usually float around that like 100 to 200,000 views on YouTube thing, whereas the White and Gold, I'll call it, it tends to live more in that 50 to 80 range. That's just YouTube metrics because I don't know. The other stuff is like Twitter likes and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how that stuff translates, but the YouTube views are a lot more solid of a metric for me in my brain anyway. The TV views I think trended a little higher for Black and Gold, but again, it was a fresher thing, so I think it started to trend downwards. Whereas White and Gold feels like it's maybe coming up from 2.0. I'm not exactly sure. It feels like maybe they're meeting somewhere around that 700, 800 mark right now, which is kind of where programs tend to float in that space. So that's just the solid metrics in terms of fans and stuff. That being said, pro wrestling fans usually tend to have a better memory of things in the past for whatever reason. Like everybody loves what they watched as a child, right? The Attitude Era was the greatest time in professional wrestling history. It was a special time. And the more it can trend in that direction, the better. And that's probably a product of human psychology, right? When we're a kid, we have less to do. We don't have stuff to worry about. So I'd go home, I'd turn on the TV, and there's pro wrestling, there's Stone Cold Steve Austin, there's John Cena, and I'm happy because I'm a kid, and that just lives well in my brain. So I remember it extremely fondly. That to me, that's just an element of human psychology, as opposed to like the product was actually better, because it's all kind of six of one, half dozen of another. If I watch both times, like, and really break them down, for me, I prefer what was happening more recently because it had more elements of character integration and storytelling in that aspect. And I prefer a little bit more than that rather than just the sole focus on in-ring product, which isn't to say that's what NXT Black and Gold was, but it was more in that direction, right? Because you had
certainly more emphasis. Certainly,
you had these eccentric characters, right? Like the Undisputed Era and the Velveteen Dream. You know, there were these characters that had this life and this presence,
right?
But it was more focused within the space of in-ring product. Like, yes, we'll do some vignettes backstage or whatever, but for the most part, it's like, hey, we're wrestlers and we're wrestling, and here's why we're wrestling, and we're trying to win championships. Whereas the newer version of NXT seemed like it had more like, oh, I'm a vigilante renegade cop, and I'm investigating this guy, and this guy's in the mob, and he's taking guys and throwing them off a bridge. You know, it had more of that stuff, which I can sink my teeth into a little bit. That being said, it still had the presentation. Of course, I'm an in-ring guy, and of course, I'm a good matches guy. For me, I still had that opportunity I had more of an opportunity for that in the white and gold era. Because I was given more TV time and more premium live event, and the caliber of guys I was able to work with was excellent, right? I was able to work with Ilya Dragunov and Wesley, and the Eddie Thorpe, just these guys who did make names for themselves back. That being said, there's fewer of that than there was in the Black and Gold era, right? In the Black and Gold era, you couldn't throw a rock without hitting some former Ring of Honor world champion or some PWG champion, or just all of us were there, right? We were all in the same building all at the same time. That's just what it was. At that time, if you made a list of the how long guys had been wrestling and how many great matches they'd had in their history, I was probably like, I don't know, 20th on the list, like 25th on the list, just because there was so many. It was like Adam Cole, Bobby Fick, it just went on and on and on. Tommaso was there, Johnny was there. There's just this massive list of in-ring talented guys, whereas the white and gold had a little bit less of that because they were integrating more of the developmental system. You had guys who are doing their third and fourth matches on, and you have champions who haven't had 20 matches yet. That's
right,
which isn't a bad thing for a developmental system. That's not inherently bad. It just means that there's a different standard for in-ring and things like that. So it's a different mix of stuff. So the only way I can judge it really is my personal taste, what I like as a product, and for me personally, what was expected of me and given to me in that sense. So for me, as a whole, the white and gold era it was preferable, but that doesn't take away from what I was doing or what was happening in the black and gold era. It's just the way I was being used, basically, and what I perceived.
No, and again, appreciate that. And of course, I mean, it's hard, like you said, like you're not trying to suggest that one was worse than the other. It was just that they were great for different reasons.
Honestly, pro wrestling is so subjective that it really just depends on what you like. If you're a person who loves in-ring action and you just love 5-star matches, which is fine, by the way. I love in-ring action. I love 5-star matches. So I was not like disappointed or anything with the black and gold there. But that would be your era of NXT. If you prefer characters and interlaced stories that are a little eccentric and this over-the-top sort of character presentation, then white and gold is probably your thing. It's just whichever thing you like. I like all of it, but I do trend a little bit more in the direction of the character stuff and the storytelling stuff, which people wouldn't expect from me, right? Because I'm like Captain Work Rate, and all I ever do is have these these matches, and it seems to be my focus. But that's part of why I loved the character that I presented so much with the backstage stuff and with the vignette stuff. And a lot of people don't see that stuff if you don't watch the week-to-week program. So a lot of people would just see the premium live events where I just walk out, have a great match, and walk to the back, and that's all they know of me. So I think I'm this like boring dolt, right? But it's like, well, you need to watch the show, which was kind of part of that more recent thing that I posted online again, which is polarizing, and again, which seems like complaining or whatever. But it was just this thing of like, people are very intent. There's a subsection of people who are intent on critiquing something that they didn't even bother watching, and we've all done it, right? I've done it. I pass judgment on something the second I see it. Like if somebody sends me a match graphic, for example, and we've all done this, right? Everybody's done this. You get sent a match graphic, and it's two guys who historically you haven't cared for their matches or whatever, and you see that match graphic and you go, "Ugh, that match must have sucked." Even if it already happened, you're like, "That match probably sucked," and you might even say to your friend, like, "Look at this match. That was probably trash or something like that," right? And then you go back and watch it, and you're like, "Oh, that was actually a really good match, and I was completely wrong, and I'm a moron, and I shouldn't have said that shit." But it's like we all do it. We all right. It's human nature to prejudge something or to make up our minds before, and it's all part of the landscape of giving things a chance and not, but. And then different factors come in. Did this person say something that you didn't like? Did they, were they mean to someone? Whatever. There's a million different things that work into the realm of human psychology, and we don't have time to break all it down right now.
No, exactly. And speaking of time, I don't want to keep you long. I know we're kind of running close to the hour we have with you. My last question for you, because you've touched on a lot of things that I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
That's great. I must have sent you the notes subconsciously in an email before. So I guess just to kind of round this thing out, you are controlling your own destiny, and that is, as you described, both scary but yet exciting at the same time.
Yes.
Right now, I'm not going to, just in the tangible, near future, what is a goal that you have for yourself that you want to achieve? And then just maybe to be a little bit aspirational, where do you want to see yourself in 5 years from now? What would, if you could look back and say, oh, that was successful, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say right now, in terms of as much as I've done in my career throughout my time on the indies, breaking in the business, trying to travel all over New England and then all over the United States, and then going international, and then breaking into Ring of Honor, which was my first television market, and then NXT, all the way to Raw, all the way to SmackDown, pay-per-views, all this stuff. And now back here in this space where I am right now, in terms of all those things I've done and all those accomplishments that I've done. The one thing, not the one thing, but the things that have been kind of evading me the most, certainly in WWE, but beforehand, are championships, right? You think about how many championships I've had. Between WWE and Ring of Honor, the answer is 0, right? So those are the big ones. Obviously, I'm not in either of those companies right now, so that's not like a goal. But even outside of WWE, before I was in WWE and before I was in Ring of Honor, I didn't have a lot of championships, and that's just a fact. I just didn't have a lot of them. Chaotic Wrestling was very good to me, and that's my home promotion where I started. But aside from them, almost nobody else. Right. It's just the way that it was. I'm not bitching about that. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just speaking my truth and my reality, and that I lived it. So I know what happened. And the reality is, outside of Chaotic Wrestling, I had 1 championship in my entire life. Okay. That doesn't sit well with me. Right. There's a lot of people who look at my career and they think I'm a bum because I never won anything. Okay. I don't think that. But I want to change that narrative. I want to change that perspective. I want to present a better brand of myself. So that's very high on my list. Number 2 is wrestling in Japan. I never had the opportunity to wrestle in Japan for whatever reason. I wrestled for the IWGP Intercontinental Championship before, but I never wrestled for it in Japan. I obviously didn't win, as I mentioned. You know, I've wrestled. I feel like I've wrestled for every championship in the world. I just lost all of them. So I feel like I want to change that narrative. I want to work in a place that I feel is a prestigious hotbed of professional wrestling. And I feel like those are my immediate goals. And maybe I say that and people don't like it, but the reality of the situation is a lot of people are in this spot and they feel like they need to like go out and prove themselves as a professional wrestler. I don't. The bottom line is I do not. I'm always going to. I don't need that pressure from a career-wise. I'm going to put that pressure on myself more than anyone else ever possibly could, right? When I walk into a match, it's me against the world. It's me against myself. I'll come up with every reason in the world to have the best match possible. You don't have to worry about that, right? And if I'm being upfront and honest, my goal in this run isn't let me have all the best matches humanly possible. I don't need that to be a goal. That's just going to happen. I can't operate outside of that. I'm gonna always walk into a show. I'm gonna always think that I'm gonna have the best match, and I'm always gonna plan to have the best match, and I'm always gonna expect myself to have the best match. I don't even need to talk about that. And I feel like if you've really watched my career, if you've given any sort of investment into me as a product, then you already know that. And if you're watching me on these independent shows, you're more than likely aware of that in some sense. If you're not, fine. You'll get introduced quickly and you'll realize, oh, I probably should have been following this guy. If in-ring action is like your thing, you're gonna find out quickly that, you know, I'm gonna over deliver pretty much every single time.
Right.
That being said, it's not my focus because I already know that's going to happen.
You check that box for yourself.
I don't even need to think about it because that's like saying, oh, well, my goal for today is breathing. Of course, my goal for today is breathing, but I don't need to think about breathing. I don't need to worry about breathing. Breathing just happens. Right. Me having great matches at these promotions, it's going to happen. I don't, unless I get injured, which knock on wood, hopefully I won't. It's a possibility, but I hope it doesn't happen.
Right.
If I can walk and I can wrestle, I promise you I'm going to over deliver on the match. That's the end of the story. And quite frankly, if you're a professional wrestler and you don't feel that way about yourself, you should probably get to work, right? Because I go to training. I started as a trainer at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. That being said, you can ask all the kids in class. I hopped right into drills because I'm going to be part of it. I'm going to keep training. I'm going to keep working hard. I'm going to keep every time I show up to the venue. I'm not going to show up to phone it in or grab a hold or rest on my laurels, say, hey, I did this last week, I'm going to do that again. No, that's not how my brain works. It's never going to work that way. Until the wheels fall off, I'm always going to focus on over-delivering and having the best match and standing out in that capacity, so much so that I don't need to focus my attention on that right now. What I want to focus my attention on is rebuilding my brand, presenting myself in a more prestigious light, and I'm going to do that by winning championships and wrestling in Japan. That's my short term. You asked about long term as well. That's getting back to a platform where I can do those things that I'm talking about in terms of my brand and representing myself, and then also continuing to have those outstanding, excellent matches in front of the biggest audience possible, right? Because now we're talking about getting in front of people who aren't aware, a new audience who's not familiar with me. Now we can circle back to that in-ring point and say, okay, now we're going to reprove myself as a professional wrestler, right? Because if I'm on that big stage and there's brand new eyes looking, now we can refocus that effort as an in-ring competitor and say, oh, it's time to show these people that I'm the best wrestler in the world, because they don't know that yet, but they're going to learn quick. That's how I feel about myself and my career. And if that comes off as egotistical or pretentious or whatever, then fine, I can live with that. But that's the mindset that I have.
I think that to be successful in your space, I think in sports, yeah, I mean, I'm a big baseball fan. You need to believe that. You need to believe that, at a fundamental base, you're the best at what you do, and how can you make that better, and how can you find other ways to engage and whatnot, and especially with wrestling, it's the uniqueness of building your own a personal brand and such, and having, you know, the tangible successes, you know, like you said, having a championship to your name and such. But I think you got to feel like you're the best in the world, or else you're not going to last very long, because there's a whole locker room of people that absolutely do think they are.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Mr. Dijak, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I hope that we weren't like every other outlet that has every other question that asks all the same thing. I tried really hard to not talk about retribution. I didn't want to talk about Vince McMahon. I didn't want to pin you down and say, oh, you sat with Tony in a private meeting. I didn't want to do any of that. So, and it was my first interview that I've done with the person of your caliber.
It was excellent. All right. It was excellent. I didn't feel like I was pressing play on my pre-taped answers at all. So that was enjoyable.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.